In the summer of 1314, 6,000 Scots rose to face 20,000 English knights.
Summer 1314. The morning mist hangs low over the Scottish countryside, curling like ghostly fingers around the rolling hills of Stirling. Somewhere beyond the veil of fog, the Bannockburn, a quiet stream, murmurs its way through marshy banks as it has for centuries. But today, the air is heavy, not with rain, but with the weight of history about to be made. Across the land, in makeshift camps, 6,000 Scots prepare to stand against an enemy 3 times their size. Farmers with calloused hands from the plow, fishermen who know the tide better than any road, blacksmiths who have turned their hammers from anvil to war. They have few horses, fewer suits of armor, but they carry something their foes will never match, an unyielding determination to decide the fate of their own homeland. Beyond the hills, 20,000 English knights and soldiers advance, a tide of steel and banners, a moving city of war. The clash between these two worlds will echo for centuries, not just in the annals of military history, but in the soul of a nation.
At the heart of the Scottish camp sits Robert the Bruce, not on a throne, not in gilded robes, but on a simple wooden stool beside the fire. The flames dance across his face, casting half in shadow, half in gold. He is not just a king tonight, he is a man among his people. For years, Bruce has fought for Scotland's independence, maneuvering through politics and battlefields alike. Many see him as their last best chance against the might of Edward II. And here, in the dim glow of the campfire, he does what all great leaders do before battle. He listens. Listens to his captains, to the scouts reporting enemy movements, to the men who will risk everything at dawn. His calm steadiness spreads like warmth through the camp. This is no grand speech-making moment. It is the quiet forging of resolve.
To understand Bannockburn, we must rewind the clock. Scotland is no stranger to English ambitions. Years earlier, under King Edward I, known as the Hammer of the Scots, the land north of the border had been invaded, garrisoned, and taxed into submission. William Wallace's uprising brought hope, but his defeat left the people weary, yet not broken. Edward I's death passed the crown to Edward II, but the ambition to rule Scotland remained. Stirling Castle, a jewel in the center of the kingdom, became the prize. In 1314, it was under siege by the Scots. An agreement was made: if the English could not relieve the castle by Midsummer's Day, it would be surrendered. That pact set a clock ticking, one that would draw the might of England northwards like iron to a magnet. It's the ultimate underdog match. Imagine your small local football team facing the reigning world champions. But here, the pitch is a battlefield, and the stakes are your home, your freedom, your future.
The English host is vast, 20,000 strong. Knights in chainmail and plate, their armor catching the sunlight in dazzling flashes. Long lines of infantry march behind them, shields slung over shoulders. Supply wagons creak under the weight of provisions, siege equipment, and the sheer momentum of an empire on the move. They move like a living machine, efficient, relentless, their sheer numbers enough to intimidate most foes into surrender before the first arrow flies. But the Scots are not most foes. They watch from the high ground, not with fear, but with the quiet confidence of those who know the land as well as their own breath.
Bannockburn was no accident of geography. It was a deliberate trap chosen by a master of terrain. Robert the Bruce had studied this ground like a scholar poring over a sacred text. Here the land was neither wide nor open, but channeled and broken. The burn itself snaked through soft earth, its banks treacherous for horses. Low-lying marshland flanked one approach, sucking the boots of any who ventured too far. On the other side, rising slopes allowed the Scots to look down on any advance, turning nature into a fortress. Bruce knew the English would come with their greatest strength, their heavy cavalry, an armored fist capable of smashing lesser armies in minutes. But cavalry needs room to gallop, to form a deadly wedge. Here, in the narrow corridors between bog and burn, that strength would become their prison. The Scots were prepared. In place of knights, they had schiltrons, dense, disciplined blocks of infantry, bristling with 12-foot spears, their tips catching the dim light like rows of cold stars. From afar, they looked like hedges of steel. Up close, they were walls of resolve. Bruce's men drilled until their arms ached, learning to hold as one body, to push forward as if each man were a stone in the same wall. They were not expecting to meet the English charge. They were planning to break it. As the English vanguard approached on June 23rd, an incident unfolded that would pass into legend. An English knight, Sir Henry de Bohun, spotted Robert the Bruce riding slightly ahead of his lines. The king was lightly armored, carrying only a battle axe, his horse smaller and nimbler than a war charger. To Bohun, this was destiny, to fell the Scottish king in a single stroke, ending the battle before it began. Lowering his lance, he spurred his destrier into a full gallop. The ground shook under the beast's pounding hooves. The air narrowed to a tunnel toward his target. Bruce did not turn aside. He watched, waited, measuring the distance as calmly as a farmer watching the shadow of a sundial. Then, in a heartbeat, he sidestepped. Rising in his stirrups, he swung the axe in a clean, perfect arc. The iron head struck Bohun's helmet dead center, splitting steel and skull alike. The knight toppled lifeless to the trampled grass. A roar surged from the Scottish ranks, not wild, but fierce and controlled, the sound of men who had just seen their leader outmatch one of England's best in the space of a heartbeat. For the English, it was the first shadow of doubt. The English pressed on with their cavalry, hoping to smash the schiltrons through sheer momentum. But nature and Bruce's foresight would not allow it. Horses sank fetlock deep in mud. Armored riders strained to keep their balance. The weight of plate, the drag of marsh, and the cramped front robbed the knights of their only advantage, speed. Again and again the chargers met the forest of spears. Some reared back in terror, throwing their riders. Others lunged and fell, skewered before they could find a gap. Each failed charge drained the English of men, of horses, of confidence. The Scots, packed tight, barely moved except to thrust and brace, their discipline holding as steady as the stones beneath Stirling's castle. The morning of June 24 broke clear. Mist lifted from the ground like steam from a kettle, unveiling the English host jammed into the narrow killing ground. What had been a confident army now looked penned and restless, its banners drooping in the still air. At Bruce's signal, the schiltrons advanced, not charging, advancing. Each man stepped in unison, the points of their spears angling forward, a living wall that rolled downhill at a measured pace. Arrows hissed from the English lines, but shields deflected the worst of them, and still the wall came on. For the English, it was as if the very land was closing in on them, a tide of sharpened wood and iron, forcing them back step by step. Those who had once looked down upon the Scots as rabble now saw, in the grim set of every bearded face, the shape of their own undoing. The crush became unbearable. Cavalry wheeled in panic, only to slam into their own foot soldiers. Men shouted, shoved, and tripped. The order of battle dissolved into a tangle of bodies and steel. In that chaos, the Scots pressed harder, spears driving relentlessly, eyes locked forward. Then came the final blow to English morale. From the ridges behind the Scottish lines, camp followers, cooks, smiths, washerwomen, boys barely in their teens came charging down, waving tools and banners, shouting as though they were fresh reinforcements. Exhausted, wounded, and demoralized, the English saw not a rabble, but a second army. Panic surged like a wave breaking a dam. What had been a battle became a rout. Knights spurred their horses for the safety of the south, abandoning comrades to the mud. Infantry cast aside shields to run faster. Behind them, the Scots did not give chase in wild disorder. They came on steady, the way they had fought, together.
By sunset, the field was quiet, save for the groans of the wounded and the caw of circling crows. The Bannockburn, once clear, ran clouded with mud and blood. Thousands of English lay dead, more were taken prisoner. Scottish losses were a fraction in comparison. Edward II, the would-be conqueror, fled with a handful of guards, his ambition scuttered to the wind. In the days that followed, word of the victory spread like wildfire. Scotland had not merely survived, it had struck a blow so great that its echo would carry across generations. The power of numbers, of wealth, of armor, all had been turned aside by unity, cunning, and the resolve of ordinary men fighting for the soil under their feet.
Bannockburn was not the end of the struggle, but it was a turning point carved into stone and story. In that narrow valley, the few defied the many and proved that the shape of history can be changed by those who refuse to bow. Centuries later, the battle remains a touchstone. For Scots, a memory of what can be won when the stakes are all or nothing. For the world, a reminder that in the contest between might and right, victory belongs to those who stand their ground. On that June day in 1314, Scotland claimed not just the battlefield, but the right to its own destiny. And that is a banner no defeat can ever tear down.